Once again, I want to draw your attention to the information sheet under 3.4 in the contents on D2L. Under assignments, good information once again given about each one of the fallacies. That may be beneficial when you do your homework assignment for this section. Fallacies of presumption. Fallacies of presumption embed assumptions into the structure of the argument being made or the question being asked. We're trying to find the thing that's concealed when we deal with a presumption. This is done three ways. A controversial premise is assumed but not stated. The conclusion restates the premise, or a premise leads to a series of conclusions, one of which is the premise itself. This is called a circular argument. So let's look at examples of each of these. Capital punishment is wrong because murder is wrong. What's missing is, according to our information, a controversial premise is assumed but not stated. What's missing here is capital punishment is murder. Okay, so we see that. This painting is ugly because it's unpleasing to the eye. The conclusion is merely restating the premise, so we're assuming it is ugly because it's unpleasing to the eye. Could be ugly because of other reasons. The third one is circular. Sgt. Pepper is the greatest album ever made. We know this is true because a panel of experts concluded that it was. We know that they are experts because they are astute enough to know that Sgt. Pepper is the greatest album ever made. I didn't write that one, but a Beatles lover did, obviously, and so, but you get the idea, circular in motion. So let's look at what is not begging the question. Capital punishment is wrong because capital punishment is murder. We're not now allowing any opportunities for assumptions to be made. The work of art is ugly because this work of art is ugly. Okay, nothing deceptive about the statement or the structure. Okay, and so once again we see them then not as a fallacy where before we saw it as a fallacy. A complex question. Ask a question in such a way that answering it would confirm an assumption within the question. It's basically a statement and a question combined. So, is this your first year that you have cheated on your taxes? Okay, that's a fallacy. Why? Because we're assuming, we're trying to confirm an assumption. We assume that they cheated on their taxes, so we're trying to get them to confirm that assumption. Not a fallacy would be to say, did you cheat on your taxes by claiming your dogs, cats, and goldfish as dependents? The second is a leading question, not a complex question, so it's not a fallacy, and we see the difference between the two. A false dichotomy is a disjunctive statement that presents two opinions, or two options, as if there were no other options. We know it's disjunctive because of the word or, and right here we use the word or. So we see the word or being used here, and so it's making two options and nothing else is possible. So example, you either buy your car from John Elway dealership or you are not a true Bronco fan. Therefore, since you claim to be a true Bronco fan, you have to buy the car you are looking for from a John Elway dealership. Pretty cut and dried. I mean, it's pretty much there. But it's saying that there's only two options. It's not saying that you can go to Ed Bozarth or Century Chevrolet or Stevenson Toyota and buy a vehicle. You have to buy it from an Elway dealership or you're not a Bronco fan. Now, I'm a Bronco fan, but I didn't buy my Toyota from an Elway dealership, right? So once again, we see the false dichotomy of trying to say these are the only two options available. Suppressed evidence is a fallacy that leaves out important evidence when making an argument. Since it requires knowledge outside the premises given, we're not going to see one of these on the exam. But it is one of those things that as you get into other levels of logic, you'll see it quite prevalent. Fallacies of ambiguity. Fallacies of ambiguity and misinterpret ambiguous statements or draw words to draw a conclusion. Something is ambiguous if it has more than one meaning. So there's two types, equivocation and the second one would be amphibole. So let's look at these two types, but keep in mind it's ambiguous if there's more than one meaning, and it's misinterpreting an ambiguous statement in order to draw a conclusion. So an equivocation is one word can have many different meanings. Equivocation then treats a word used with different meanings as if the meanings are the same. So an example, several years ago there were what were called Bud Light commercials. And this started because Miller got the rights to the word light, L-I-G-H-T. And so in their commercials, they couldn't give somebody a Bud Light and give them a beer. So when somebody came in and said, "I'd like a light," they were handed a lamp, they were handed a torch, they were handed a lighter, multiple things. And so they had these commercials that were out there. And so that's an example of an equivocation. Another example is to say Jerry Lee Lewis is called the killer. Now, Jerry Lee Lewis was not a gangster. He was actually an entertainer. Piano. He played phenomenal piano. So Jerry Lee Lewis is called the killer. He must have murdered a lot of people. The equivocation says because we don't understand the definition of the word killer or how it's used in the context of this statement, that therefore he was a murderer. Lindsay Lohan is a good actress. An actress is a person, so Lindsay Lohan must be a good person. In this case, the word good means something different in each case. Okay, and so keeping that in mind, a good actress and a good person, that definition of good may be different because it's ambiguous. It doesn't give us enough information. So because of a lack of information. The second one is called an amphibole. And this is caused when an ambiguous phrase, I guess I have a typo there, is misinterpreted. Professor Johnson said that he will give a lecture about heart failure in the biology lecture hall. It must be the case that a number of heart failures occurred there recently. So is it that heart failures occurred in the biology hall, or the lecture about heart failure will be in the biology lecture hall? So we see this. This is kind of a funny one. I like the one where I use it says it demands where you put the period. Let's eat, where you put the comma. Let's eat, comma, grandma. Or leave out the comma and it's let's eat grandma. So once again, an example of an amphibole. Fallacies of grammatical analogy. A fallacy of a grammatical analogy occurs because they are grammatically similar to arguments that are good ones. So there's a composition and division. So there's two types, and we want to look at each one of these briefly. Composition illegitimately attributes characteristics of part to a whole, of each part to a whole. Notice I put the bold on each part to whole. When we look at division, I also have it bolded. So this one deals with each part to a whole, and division deals with the whole to each part. So it's easy to grasp if you get the understanding of these two words. So composition is the building of each part making a whole. Division is the whole being broken down to each part. Okay, so just a kind of a visual example. I can lift each individual block in that cinder block wall. Therefore, I can lift the entire wall. Okay, well, yeah, I can lift the one block, but when I put all those blocks together, one is easy to lift, the whole cannot be lifted by a human anyway. An example, chocolate, tuna, vanilla ice cream, ketchup, and butter each taste good. Therefore, their mixture will taste good. I haven't tried this. If anybody would like to and then bring the results to class with you on when we meet next time, I would appreciate it greatly. Not a fallacy would be to say each individual ingredient of this cake is fattening, therefore the entire cake is fattening. In this case, what's true of the parts is true of the whole. Okay, so once again, keeping in mind it's of how you look at it. The division says illegitimately attributes characteristics of the whole to each part. Water is a liquid. It is made up of hydrogen and oxygen. Therefore, hydrogen and oxygen are liquids as well. Okay, now anybody who's been to science knows that that's not a true statement. Okay, if oxygen is a liquid, I would drown when I breathe, right? So we keep that in mind. So the whole liquid, the whole of hydrogen and oxygen combined is a liquid, water, but the parts doesn't mean it's the same. Cake tastes good on its own. Therefore, flour, salt, baking soda, sugar, and butter each taste good on their own. Once again, try this and then bring your results to class and let the class know how it worked out for you. So these will be found on the test. Hopefully this is not too difficult. Once again, use the information sheets that are available at the at the beginning of D2L on each section and as clarity, and go ahead and do 3.3, 3.4. Bring them to class with you, and we'll talk about them in a little bit greater detail at class when we meet next time.